history, print media has withstood a long and rocky road of trials and tribulations to come to the point where it's at today. Print media has ultimately formed society into what has become the Western culture. However, as our culture changed, so did print media. But what influence did the changing technology of print media have over our evolving culture? With the invention of Johann Gutenberg's press in 1447, print media have played a significant role in shaping public perceptions in modern society. Print media allows for information dissemination and communication. It has shaped the way we learn, think, and act in modern society, and plays an important role in our daily lives by providing us with news, entertainment, and information. However, print media is not a new technology. Kings used to circulate news to people as proclamations as far back as the ancient Romans. However, the first true form of print media for the use of mass communication was produced after the invention of the printing press, where mass production allowed for mass communication. This appeared in the form of pamphlets, which could be quickly produced in small presses, profitably sold, and widely circulated by peddlers. These were widely used in England, France, and Germany in the early 16th and 17th centuries due to the religious controversies that were occurring. The role of the church started losing ground in Europe, where more of the masses were getting access to secular texts and started questioning the power of the church. Martin Luther from Germany was one of the earliest and most effective pamphleteers with his introduction and promotion of the Reformed religion entitled Lutheranism. Europe had a long history of edicts and censorship over seditious material. However, this did not stop the circulation of pamphlets and resulted in the imprisonment of many people, including Voltaire and Rousseau in France. In England, pamphlets gained increasing propagandist influence during the political and religious controversies in the years before, during, and after the Civil English Wars. In addition, due to the taxes on stamp, paper, advertisements, and newspapers, the sale of pamphlets in England greatly increased. The pamphlet continued to have powerful influence throughout the 18th century. In North America, pre-revolutionary political tension initiated the beginning of extensive pamphleteering. Foremost among the writers of political pamphlets was Thomas Paine, whose Common Sense appeared in January 1776. Paine emulated Luther's application of the vernacular, using plain language, so it was read and understood by thousands. The reaction to Paine's pamphlet supports Innes's quote from his book, "The slightest pamphlet is nowadays more vendible than the works of the learnedest men." Pamphlets continue to be an important tool of political protest and campaigning and play a crucial role in the spread of controversial information, sparking civil unrest movements, and furthering the role of print media in the democratic process. Although many changes have occurred in the print technology, pamphlets still remain inexpensive to produce and easy to distribute among consumers. With the improvement of the printing press and the increasing number of literate common people, another form of print media was rising: the newspaper. Although newspapers have been part of our daily life for several centuries, they have gone through a number of changes in form and content. They originated as handwritten news sheets that contained information on wars and politics in Europe. The present-day newspapers were influenced by the mid-16th century Venice phenomenon called gazettes. Their format and appearance at regular intervals were what influenced modern papers today. The first actual printed newspaper was published in Germany in 1605. It was heavily censored and reported only foreign news. This seemed to be the trend in the rest of the European countries. The first English newspaper was actually published in Amsterdam and was a translation of the European newspaper, the Krant. Although England contained printing presses, it wasn't until almost 200 years after William Caxton set up the first press in Westminster that the first weekly was published in England in 1622, entitled The Weekly News. With the production of the paper, the appearance of the Courant started changing, containing titles or headlines to draw the reader's attention. Dahl referred to this as truly journalistic inventive genius that puts English publishers miles ahead of almost all of their continental colleagues. The publication of English newspapers was restricted due to the Licensing Act of 1662 As a result, the London Gazette, a government-sanctioned newspaper which originated in 1665, was the only mass-produced newspaper available in London during this time. It wasn't until the end of the Licensing Act in 1695 that saw a large increase in the number of publications and the appearance of the first daily sheet, the Daily Courant. Although the press had more freedom to print papers during this time, the limited printing capacity curbed the large circulation of newspapers and led to the appearance of a substantial number of smaller ones. The first high circulation newspaper, the London Times, in 1784, was made possible by the invention of the steam press in 1814. The production of newspapers was increased to 12,000 copies in an hour, with improvements on this invention in 1685 with the rotary steam press, decreasing the cost tremendously and making it affordable to the emerging middle class, merchants and traders, large and small. As a result, the content of the newspaper started to change even more. Gone were the days of the partisan journals being produced for purely academic purposes. The Times, a strong, independent newspaper, was nicknamed the Thunderer. This was due to its heavy substance on social and political reform. It monopolized the newspaper field in Britain until the introduction of the penny press in 1832. The inspiration for this publication came from Charles Knight's Penny magazine and was the revelation for the creation of America's penny press. The penny press introduced the notion of journalistic rather than editorial newspaper content, and according to Dr. Cusimano, the penny press could be single-handedly viewed as the most influential catalyst in the rise of print media. America's first penny press, The Sun, was published in 1833 by Benjamin Day. Its motto was, "The object of this paper is to lay before the public at a price within the means of everyone all the news of the day at the same time, offer an advantageous medium for advertisements." Day imitated London's practice of newsboys hawking their newspapers on the streets, whereby making the phrase, "Extra, extra, read all about it," a common phrase heard in households. The development of the penny press started in the East Coast, where, as the middle and working class, immigrants, and emerging literate class grew, so did their desire for the news. The simple vocabulary meant easy comprehension by lower class and less educated readers. Penny papers emerged as a cheap source of news due to the inclusion of advertising and the introduction of steam-powered printing. It covered crime, tragedy, adventure, and gossip, in addition to the stock market, entertainers, politics, sports, and weather, all of which are still included in present-day newspapers. In 1856, Robert Bonner was the first to run a full-page ad in a newspaper. It promoted his own literary paper, the New York Ledger. Quite possibly the most famous penny press papers started in 1855 by George Jones and Henry Raymond. Its purpose was stated as follows. The penny presses contributed to changes in newspaper content and structure. Journalists were non-partisan, supporting the notion of an independent stance on public issues. American newspapers became very important during the Revolution, not only keeping the American public informed of the event taking place, but according to David Ramsey, it was instrumental in establishing American independence. The pen and the press had merit equal to that of the sword. After the Revolution, the press played a vital role in affairs of the new nation. This was reflected in Thomas Jefferson's statement, "Were it left to me to decide whether we should have government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate any moment to prefer the latter." However, freedom sometimes resulted in yellow journalism, where newspaper reporting emphasized sensationalism over facts. A major example of this was when Hearst and Pulitzer, two competing New York publishers, printed false stories about the Spanish occupation of Cuba, contributing to the factors that pushed the United States and Spain into war in Cuba. The Industrial Revolution brought many advances in technology and transformed all aspects of life and society, dramatically affecting the production of newspapers. These technologies also allowed the inclusion of illustrations within newspapers. The first pictorial weekly newspaper was Frank Leslie's Illustrated paper in 1872. This process eventually evolved to halftone photography. The first screen photograph to use this process appeared in the New York Daily Graphic in 1873 and instituted the features of the modern illustrated newspaper, including bold banner headlines, extensive use of illustrations and photo features, and the addition of funny pages. The introduction of the linotype composing machine in 1886 increased the pre-production process and was instrumental in newspapers continuing to gain popularity with an astounding circulation figure of 1 million by 1890. Even with the mass production of the radio in the 1920s and the introduction of digital media, newspapers still have a readership of over 1 billion readers in the present day. The special attributes of print media still render newspapers as an important source of information. Print media has been very influential in the development of our society by serving the religious, cultural, and political communities and closing the gap between cultural divides that were so prominent in the pre-print era. It has been instrumental in improving literacy skills, as well as providing information on political, economic, and cultural topics, and even being the catalyst in the scientific revolution. It is safe to say that life as we know it today would not be the same without printed media.